The link between academic engagement and the student's home life was highlighted in the interview process. The interview findings were consistent with the findings from the literature review. Although there may be some complexities in terms of how certain students respond to particular parenting styles, it is evident that the most effective parenting style for student engagement is one that is authoritative. However, it was highlighted in the interviews that there is a point where the authoritative parenting style can become degrading for some students. This was an element that was demonstrated from all perspectives: students, parents and teachers. A major finding from the interview process was the importance of a balancing parenting style. This was in line with the conclusions that were drawn from literature review. Authoritative parenting styles that are strict but encourage success of their children by promoting the importance of learning and engagement for future prospects give students the best opportunity to succeed in education.
My interviews were conducted using a 5-step data collection protocol. The data was gathered and coded using a colour scheme. From there, the data was distributed into a table. This table displays the categories and themes that will be used to inform the group and contribute to our understanding of what is needed in our future action research project.
If my literature review has taught me one thing, is that peer influence plays a major role in student engagement. This effect can be both positive and negative and impacts on the attitudes students develop towards education and learning, as well as the overall motivation towards achieving academically. One possible reason for a student's peers having such a great influence over their achievement is the strength of the relationships formed throughout adolescence. Peer groups are likely to be extremely important during adolescence due to the volume of time peers spend with each other. As a student begins to develop into adolescence, they spend a lot more time in the company of their peers and less in the parents of other adults. This amount of time spent with peers can impact both directly and indirectly and can take many forms, such as modelling and observation, in which students observe members of their peer group and influenced by their commitment and attitudes towards school, or they may be exposed to more indirect ways, such as peer pressure, bullying and teasing. This form of peer pressure inadvertently communicates behaviour that the group deems acceptable. This accepted behaviour can positively or negatively influence the attitude of the individual student to conform to the norms and expectations of the peer group. My literature review also shows that students form friendship groups with peers who share similar academic characteristics, with lower achieving students banding together and higher achieving students grouping together as well. While this trend is shown extensively in the research, it is not known why students form these peer groups. My action research seeks to explain this.
Individual literature review is focused on how teachers influence student engagement. I discovered just how much of an impact each classroom teacher have on student engagement. I learned that teachers have a huge influence on student engagement both positively and negatively, and this is dependent on the attitude of the teacher. This influence can make an impact on how students feel about school, education and learning. The literature review shows that teachers play an important role in motivating their students to achieving academically. The group's overall topic of student engagement and my individual subtopic of teachers' influence on student engagement are two very broad topics. This enabled me to review a broad range of teaching elements contributing to how teachers engage their students. These include our teachers' passion for teaching, understanding and knowledge of how students learn, teaching pedagogy, building rapport, creating positive learning environments and making curriculum content relevant all contribute together to engaging students. The literature review showed conclusive evidence that when teachers focus on these aforementioned elements to teaching, that they are giving their students the best opportunity for student engagement and for student academic performance.
Flipped classrooms have been shown to be effective as it involves switching what was traditionally done as homework and in class. In a flipped classroom, students would read or watch base material before the class and would partake in activities expanding on this information in the classroom. After the students have become familiar with the topics through videos or readings, the class can explore and expand on this information through debates, group projects or constructive activities. Utilising a flipped classroom has students acquire knowledge in the lower ends of Bloom's taxonomy on their own time, while allowing the teacher to be present while the students undertake tasks that require higher order thinking, analysing and synthesising of information. My action research has been designed to explore why and how these strategies affect student engagement.
After gathering information from our individual literature reviews, it was then time to share the information we had gathered from our individual data analysis. This included the synthesis of information which would later inform our action research program. Here is some of the raw discussion we had during our meetings.
So my action research study was a survey conducted using Year 7 students as a whole class, together as a class the whole time. Students were asked a variety of questions with the intent of discovering why students form their peer groups and if they were aware of the impact these groups had on their own engagement. Students were asked questions that sought to discover students' attitudes towards not only their own engagement, but the engagement and attitude towards learning of members of their peer group.
Yeah, that's interesting that you say that, Paddy. Some of the literature that I read is consistent with what you were saying. For example, the link I could make with the findings you have made is how students from the home life might affect, or students' home life might affect the people they hang out with or their peers. And that sort of affects the decision they're making. What I also found is the subject that I interviewed had shared this same experience.
Well, that does link with teachers' pedagogy in being able to facilitate like group work,
Collaborative
learning that involves students working with each other towards a common goal.
Yeah. Teachers want students to work collaboratively together. I found that if they let, that needs to really be structured, where maybe the teacher selects the groups, because students, from my research findings were that students with lower academic values will then pair together, and then kind of that group sets the norms and can influence other students as they come in to lower their academic values as well.
If we group lower achieving kids, so if we split the groups up and we have some lower achieving students with higher achieving students, do the lower achieving students go up or do the higher achieving students go down? How do we make sure they go up?
If students with lower achieving or students that are coming into the groups, their academic decline is, because all students go through a certain decline in adolescent years due to a number of things, like I think Morgan has brought up and Dave has spoken about as well. But if you partner them with higher achieving students, that decline is decreased.
Like if you have lower achieving and they're grouping together because that's the sort of people they hang out with, and then you've got higher achieving students and they group together, wouldn't they excel? And then
so what we're talking about though is we're talking about in class as a teacher, splitting up those groups and grouping up lower achieving kids with higher achieving kids.
Because then those students are working within the higher achieving student helps the other student working within their zone of proximal development.
Students as well, they feel a lot more comfortable learning from their peers, and they're more comfortable asking their peers questions than they are asking their teachers the questions.
That's it. If you said, like your research has shown, Samuel, that students like to partake in collaborative learning, what we really need to focus on, what our recommendation could be to the teachers, is that they are careful of what students are in groups with which students, because if you group all lower achieving students, that again, like my literature review showed, that can set the norms and values for that group, and students feel pressured to conform with those norms, whether it be higher achieving or lower achieving.
Here, Dave brings up the important point of the teacher-student relationship.
Because at the end of the day, we want our students to be engaged, not disengaged. Now, if we have kids of all low ability working together and teachers have structured it that way, they're going to become disengaged and then we're losing.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. So the teachers should structure these groups in a way where they have a nice mix.
Yeah. So using
a mixed ability group.
Using teaching strategies such as project-based learning to have students working together for common goals. You can then have those groups and have everyone, they do all their different roles, and higher achieving students can sort of guide lower achieving students in their roles in the group.
Proximal development.
Right, so we've established how important the peer and teacher relationship is, but what influences the students' decisions? In the interviews I discussed with my participants the effect of home life, parenting strategies and parental engagement with the school on students' academic achievement. Here are some of the links discussed with the rest of the team.
The authoritative parenting style was the best, but it sort of got to a point where if it was too authoritative, then they sort of like either rebel, and then there's the other ones that are kind of balanced. So they're looking for a balanced parenting style where.
So you want it on that sort of spectrum.
Yeah. So if you push that boundary, if you're too relaxed, then they're not engaged. But if you're too strict, they're not engaged either.
Okay, so students' home life affects who they associate with.
It's really strict, and that could influence influence who students associate with our school as well. Because what I was trying to figure out in some of my survey questions attempted to discover why students actually form their peer groups and whether or not they were aware of the influence these peer groups had on their engagement.
And like we've all had that experience where like your parents will sort of approve or disapprove of certain friends that you're with, right?
So what Mark and the group discovered was that it is important who students associate with when looking at their engagement. However, Samuel then brought up an interesting finding from his focus group project.
Collaborative tasks all got the highest approval rating amongst the students and had the most obvious connection for students in observations.
Tasks.
When they got to work with other students, it didn't really matter who they were paired with.
Wow, so student engagement is increased irrespective of who they associate with. This is going to need further investigation.
Wait, so these are just like some of the office antics we come up with when we're doing an action research project. Just studying the way we're going to get him. That's going to be great.
Sorry, back to our project.
Research stated the current action research found that there was a statistically significant correlation between attitudes towards school and grades and student friendship groups. Students who enjoyed school were more likely to form peer groups with their students who had similar educational values. The same was true for students who did not enjoy or place as much importance on school, sharing the same values as their friends.
An interesting point raised here by Mark, as it highlights the correlation between student social interaction and their academic achievement.
Yeah, what it was clear from analysing the results was that how they would be perceived by their peers was their main influence on how they wanted to do on the test.
As you can see, many connections were made between the data from all group members. I understand it can be confusing, so let's do a quick recap. A student's engagement is heavily influenced by who they associate with, which is largely determined by their home life and values. Therefore, the student's-teacher relationship is vital if they're going to create pedagogy that takes advantage of the findings from the group data. The group will now outline an action research project based on the information we have discovered.
Based on the findings from our group, we have developed an action research program that can be implemented into our future school careers. The program we intend to implement is a 10-week program designed to determine the effectiveness of collaborative learning as a method for increasing student engagement. During the 10 weeks, we will implement a number of collaborative learning strategies with the intent of increasing engagement for all students. For example, the program will implement general group work, team building exercises, project-based learning tasks, problem-based learning tasks, and research tasks. The research question for our program is as follows: is collaborative learning an effective strategy to increase student engagement?
So the data collection strategy that we're going to use today or in our future program is a standardised survey that's going to be implemented at the beginning, midway through the program and at the end of the program. By implementing the survey through the beginning, middle and end, it gives us an indication on whether our program is actually effective, and it also gives us some vital information on whether the group work or the group strategies are in fact effective.
There are a number of considerations that have to be taken into account to ensure our action research proposal will meet ethical standards. Prior to the implementation of our program, students and teachers will be briefed on the benefits of our program. The program benefits will be an improvement of student engagement as a result of the implementation of group work. There are a number of factors that must be taken into consideration when accounting for potential harm. For example, a program that will be implemented looks to promote collaborative learning. Therefore, as teachers, we must understand the potential for conflict when pairing particular students up. Therefore, as teachers, we need to understand the potential for conflict when pairing particular students up together. Privacy. Privacy is an important consideration when implementing an action research project. The results of the study will only be released with the consent of both the parents and the students. As a result of privacy issues, it is extremely important that students and parents will be provided with the information on the rationale of the program. Students and parents will be given the opportunity to withdraw if they feel uncomfortable at any point throughout the study. Prior to the commencement of our program, students will take home a participation letter to their parents. This participation letter will ensure that parents are fully aware of what
the program entails for their students. Finally, avoiding coercion is an extremely important aspect of our study. It is extremely important that our students' responses are not manipulated at all by the interviewer asking the questions.
On his homework, not the song.